So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Academy of Advanced Thoughts, and this conversation may be part one of some, because I doubt that we will sufficiently cover all of the points that need to be covered or want to be covered. But it all started in a post on the Academy website, Facebook group on the 20th of September at 17:57. That was a screenshot of a BBC article that I shared. And it was interesting how Professor Robert Dingwall, who's one of the government advisors, said, you know what, the virus is here forever and a day. The public may just be growing comfortable with the idea that people will die, just as they accept that people die of flu every year. And in fact, the journalist leans quite heavily into the fact that, maybe there's a messaging problem. We're supposed to eat out and help out, and we're not supposed to be mingling more than 6 people. And actually, maybe the public aren't totally clear as to what's going on. There's lots of other different angles. In my head, just as a starter, I see things in 4 different components here. I see things in terms of the virus as a concept, a biological concept. I see epidemiology as a secondary component, which of course is split into frequency and patterns. And I see virus, I see epidemiology, I see politics, and then I see consequence. And so in my head, I see these 4 different sections. That doesn't need to instruct our discussion, but how I determine things is they tend to drop into, in my head, one of those factors, one of those elements. And inside consequence is something that I'm very enamored by, due to the fact that the political, now back to the politics bucket, the politics angles of things may or may not necessarily sufficiently address consequence, and or how viruses actually operate, which of course then is modelled by and studied by epidemiology. Today I'm joined by Matt and Richard and Fiona and Martin, and maybe Diane joins, I would hope so, to give this Swedish perspective, quote unquote. But if she doesn't, then I've spoken this morning to a couple of people online from the Swedish sectors of our world, just to get their opinion of what's going on. Fiona, I wanted to start with you because on our conversation on Facebook, your very passionate statement or comment was something that I resonated quite greatly with. It was almost as if it was the first time I had seen someone write the level of what I would class as frustration that I also share. But I'm not a psychotherapist and you are. So could I start by asking you where your perspective comes from in all of this, and what you would like to most highlight to those who may not be aware of other parts of consequence? And I'm going to put you off mute while I can, if you don't beat me to it. You beat me to it.
I think there's a very sort of dwindling skill set that seems to be missing in the handling of this, which goes under the complicated term of common sense. And it just seems as if it's kind of missing. And what people have a government because we hope if you lose your head when all others lose theirs, that the government will be keeping their head, but they've lost it, and they're reacting, it would seem, to many people who maybe can keep their feet on the ground, that maybe still aren't so in such fear that they're following the strongest voice. So we've got a situation of the person who's got the platform is the person who's saying what's going on, combined with these increasing reduction on freedom of being, freedom of speech, we've got unprecedented, that hideous word of YouTube taking people off, Facebook taking people off if you mention anything that's contrary. It isn't terrorism that we're dealing with. This is a virus which was here before us and will be here after us. It's how we evolve. A virus is a piece of code. Dr. Zach Bush is incredible on how he simplifies the understanding of a virus. And also it goes back to just kind of, War of the Worlds. We had these massive advanced machines that were taken down by a bacteria in that sense, because they hadn't discovered viruses, I think, when he'd written it. So we're not using our common sense. We're not going, okay, we're trying to fight something that is way more intelligent than us.
Do you feel that the reason why we're not using common sense could well be because there is also a political agenda here at play? And even though the Prime Minister has said on record 2 days ago, and I quote, that he says he is deeply spiritually reluctant to make any of these impositions or infringe anyone's freedom, end quote. Do we believe that that is something that, if he was truly reluctant deeply to do, then in fact he may have a different approach than what seems to maybe be having his hand somewhat forced politically? Is that the reason why common sense isn't that common?
I mean, I don't think any of us know, but we probably all know little snippets. But definitely, his party is so incredibly split. You only have to read what is kind of the Tory paper, The Spectator, to see how much, without question, one of the journalists are against lockdown or extreme COVID actions, every one of them, to the point that they've even started up a website which is full of scientific and learned backup called Lockdown Skeptics, because they're frustrated and informed, which kind of, when your top party is so visible that there is kind of rumblings in the ranks, it is for the informed confusing for us. I mean, so many people don't agree with it, but they keep much quieter than the people who are frightened.
Yeah, it's interesting how Gary Turner, 13-time world champion, very dear friend of mine, and also my martial arts instructor in one part of my life. Gary Turner is vehemently in disagreement with what you've just said, mainly due to the fact, I would say, with massive respect to Gary, I think out of his ignorance to this point, he believes that what you've said, and in fact he says, I disagree wholeheartedly and then some in the Facebook chat. He says, I then took that offline and asked him what his point of disagreement is. And he says that to make the point that you're making sounds like a denier point that could be seen as, this is nonsense. This whole face mask thing is nonsense, or it's confusing and it's a removal of freedom. Whereas actually what we need to do is do exactly what the government has said, that the government is being very clear, very directive. We follow the guidelines. They've got our best interests at heart. That's his view. What would you say to that?
I would say that the government is incredibly inconsistent. Fauci, for instance, back in the early days, said people do not need to wear face masks. For goodness sake, face masks do nothing, for instance, for flu. That's exactly what he said. Fauci now says wear face masks. So if we're supposed to be following the government because the government knows best, why do governments, the government of the biggest, most highest profile country in the world is swaying wildly, but it's dictated by the CDC and its main sponsors are Johnson and Johnson, or Pfizer, however you pronounce it, and Bill Gates and all of that. When there is indecision, you get conspiracy theories coming up. But conspiracy theories of yesterday are realities of today. So there has to be pushback. We're not sheep.
Indeed. So I'm glad that we've been, thank you for that, Fiona. I will definitely come back to you several times in this call. We're joined by Diane from Sweden, who is dialed in. Diane, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic.
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. We can indeed. Diane, I was explaining earlier that we met at a bar in Moscow.
Yeah, well, those were the days.
Indeed, remember bars. So now, you're joining us from Sweden, from also with a Sweden perspective. One of the things that I'm finding interesting from that view is that, and I watch and read Professor Anders Tegnell quite a lot, who is the government primary advisor on Sweden's response. And I was fascinated by, on the ITV News report on the 24th of September this year, that he said that Sweden is nowhere near herd immunity, despite the fact that it actually, most people don't wear face masks, etc. Herd immunity won't necessarily get there until vaccine comes. But Sweden's secret, in his opinion, if there is one, is that the pitched lockdown measures, i.e. how the messaging was disseminated, was put at a level that could be sustained medium to long term. And at no point did lockdown become a super tight draconian set of measures. It was actually a very pragmatic and gentle view. But I'm also aware of the fact that from the Swedes that I know, they jokingly would say that social distancing is pretty much the way that the culture interacts anyway. So, so to that, what's your view on that, and more importantly, how you see things?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I mean, I think it was quite debated initially here as well, I have to say. I mean, you know, there were a lot of people who were very doubtful, especially as we saw, you know, the UK and all the other countries locking down. There were a lot of voices here that were saying, you know, oh God, we are so stupid and we're not taking it seriously. And I think, I mean, Anders Tegnell must have thought, you know, he's just like a broken record. He just kept saying the same thing again and again and again. And he just kept saying, we have to have something that we can sustain in the long term. And it was actually this that resonated with me, because, you know, he said, you have to realize that you have to think about the time, what happens after lockdown, meaning what happens after reopening, which is exactly what we're seeing right now. So, and particularly in the autumn. And I mean, numbers are rising here now as well, a little bit again. Still, you know, absolute numbers are fairly small, but the trend is there, which, you know, is naturally when universities get together again, and, you know, and younger people, you know, go together. But I think ultimately it was an approach that we could accept, that we could deal with. And I mean, yeah, we also have a lot of space, you know, I mean, it plays in our favor that we are, I don't know, Europe's fourth largest country in terms of landmass, and we only have 10 million people. So you can get out of each other's way if you choose to do so. And that also showed in, you know, where we had hotspots. It was usually in crammed sort of suburban areas around Stockholm and Gothenburg, where a lot of people live closely together. So there's a bit of luxury involved in having that space. But I think the Swedes are quite, they have a high level of civil obedience. They are quite unemotional about these things in general. They just say, okay, we just have to do it, and so we do it. You don't get that sort of moment of aggression where people are, you know, throwing things at each other because they feel the person's not, you know, behaving in the way they should be. And, you know, to your point earlier, I mean, we were joking about the Finnish people, because you say, well, you tell the Finns to stay 2 meters apart, and they go like, oh, that's close. So, but I do think, and I think it was brought across quite strongly by not only Anders, but there's this other guy, Giesecke, who actually was interviewed in a UK channel a couple of times, and he was very no nonsense about it. He just said, the reason we're seeing a lot of people die right now is because the older people have to die first before we see that ebbing off. And he said, ultimately, in 2 years' time, we will probably have the same kind of percentage in every country having died or having been affected. And I think it's for the social peace and the quality of life and the economic impact. It was the wiser choice ultimately to say, we have to do the things that people will do out of free will. And only very limited. I mean, we still have the restrictions that we're not allowed to gather more than 50 people. Mm-hmm. And they just yesterday decided not to get ease on that restriction either. Which has had a bad economic impact on, the cultural scene, on we had no parks open, no amusement, no nothing, because they all fell under the 50 people rule. No nightclubs, nothing. So it wasn't all that jolly Swedes go about their daily life as they've always done. And there has been a lot of deliberate restrictions. People haven't seen their elderly parents for half a year, or only from afar and waved. But I think, only time will tell, and everybody becomes an expert on it. But I'm quite glad that we took the approach that we took, because it's the whole back and forth. I mean, I'm also involved with the hospitality industry in the UK, and it's heartbreaking. They cannot do anything. They're really willing to do whatever it takes to support, but the direction changes every 5 minutes. On funerals, 15, weddings, 30, no, the other way around. Is it including the photographer, or can the groom come as well? I mean, it really is,
it's heartbreaking. Thank you, Diane. Back to you, Fiona, before I pass over to the gents for their perspective as well. And then back to Diane, no doubt, several times too. Fiona, from when you're listening to Diane speak about the perspective from over there, and she's mentioned a few times that Diane was glad that Sweden took the approach that of creating restrictions that were inside people's free will, and the ability to act within their free will. I can't help but wonder whether your point resonates to that somewhat in terms of the mental consequence, the mental health consequence of when a government, or there is restriction, I should say, without being blamestorming, when there is restriction that removes some civil liberties. Do you fear that there are consequences from a mental health perspective of that at the most fundamental element of being a human? Oh, I'm going to unmute you. Sorry. I beat you that time. I got there. 1-1 all.
It's really horrific. We were built to hug. If you just think about kissing in an abstract sense, we're basically licking each other. That's what snogging is. And the whole point we've evolved to kiss is to swap and to immune our small groups. It's shaking hands. Why do we do that? We've got 5 weird things at the end of our arms. Shaking hands would kind of be weird if you met an alien. So everything we do has a root in some sort of evolutionary common sense. I mean, you had something I read yesterday in the States, 48,000 cases in some university, 2 hospitalizations. 2 in 48, not people sick, just going to hospital. If we count, we're bringing it up to an awareness. If we had a little counter every day, introduced today, of how many heart attacks there were, and said it was because of people eating lard, then there would be hysterics. There would be everyone having pains in their heart, everyone ringing up 111. We get what we focus on. It's the fundamental in psychotherapy. And so if those cases stopped being quoted, and we said today 10 people died of the flu and 1 of corona, people would start to kind of normalize and not panic so much, including the government itself.
Mm.
But saying 50,000 people have got corona, when, you know, we know what happened in America when they banned alcohol. Everything just went on underground.
Yeah.
You know, you only had to go out onto Portobello just after lockdown, and everyone was like drinking on the corner.
We were living there actually. My wife and I were living in Notting Hill, 30 metres around the corner from Portobello Road, and you couldn't even walk down Portobello Road because of the thousands of people drinking outside.
Yeah, so if you stop someone, they will rebel. So if you say please and kind of leave it to common sense and then gently ease people, the police, I think, are being amazing. They're not being heavy-handed. The British police are really cool. They manage the Notting Hill Carnival, which, you know, other police come to study. And the government, you know, when they said we'll bring in the army to make people wear masks, seriously, you're bringing in the army to do something that if you spray an aerosol, it goes right through.
Yeah, and what's more so is then there's the review of whether we should allow students to, or rather we should force students to stay on university campus for Christmas. Now, as a parent of 2 university students, that ain't going to happen.
No,
so I don't know how they're going to police me.
Yeah, no, and how can they police students? The police do have to sleep. They'll open the door, they'll go out, they'll hit your lift. You know, they're treating us as if we don't have common sense. They're pushing us down so people will push back. But that's the strong. The vulnerable, I work on a phone line, and, you know, the pain of people and how frightened they are and how they just don't get what's going on. I mean, people just frightened to touch trees because somebody else might have touched a tree, or they heard dogs can carry it and they're running miles. So misinformation is vast.
Absolutely. Right. Well, thank you, Fiona. Martin, from your perspective, from what you've heard, what are your reflections from listening to the 2 ladies so far?
Well, I think there's a lot of elements that resonated from both what Fiona and Diane have said, and there's points of where it resonates all together as well. Because for me, I'm kind of not well informed enough about medical stuff to really understand anything about a virus anyway. So from my point of view, what I'm looking at here is how the government have handled this. And so I expected a decent strategy from the government. Whereas what I'm seeing, I feel, and I think Diane kind of alluded to this, that the strategy is to throw as much stuff at the wall and see what sticks from this government, and then change direction whenever something doesn't stick. And that's not a strategy at all. And I also think there's not been enough specifics. The specificity, sorry, I always struggle with that word, has not been there from the government whenever they do say something. So it feels too much like the announcements from the government are coming across as vague, which means that there's a lot of grey areas in people's interpretation of what they've said.
And not without being a political commentator, could you at least cast an aspersion as to why key messaging could not be very key and quite vague and a bit hedge betty, kind of blitzkriegish?
Well, from my point of view, it looks like there's quite a number of dead cats piling up on the table here. So whenever there is something that's going on politically in our negotiations for Brexit, for example, there seems to be another thing to kind of put on the table so that the news is distracted by something. Whether it's making sure that your wedding party is no longer more than 30 people or whatever it is. These things seem to get announced regularly when there's something else going on in the news. It feels to me.
Okay. I must admit, it's as someone who created a change.org campaign to enable online weddings to be legally recognised, because when my wedding was going to happen, we were allowed 0 people. Actually, we weren't allowed to have a wedding because you weren't allowed to be in the same room as a registrar. I must admit that I have, and I will probably put this nearer the end of the conversation as to my view of why things are like they are, and give other people share a voice. But I am amazed at, for instance, the stopping pubs serving from 10. Now, 10 to 11 has, from an epidemiologist's perspective, and I know several, and I've spoken to them, and I continually speak to them, so I can make sure that I'm honest to the news stories of what's actually happening in terms of patterns and frequencies of social impact. There will be there will be not even a recognizable downturn in any form of cases or deaths from closing a pub at 10. But what there will have is 50% reduction in evening revenue for the hospitality industry. That's for sure. That's fact. And now that concerns me greatly, and it makes me quite upset. So anyway, thank you, Martin. I will come back to you shortly. Richard, your reflections, your views in a succinct manner.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, fascinating. I thought that came into my head was that guy Hofstede, the cultural guy, the power distance ratio. I wonder if there's a link between the Hofstede cultural models of countries and the numbers of infections. It'd be quite interesting to look at. I come to this from I used to be a regional director of AstraZeneca, the global pharmaceutical company which is involved in the vaccines. I'm not an expert. I've also worked inside government as a British diplomat and seen it abroad. And also I worked with the Cuban biotech industry. The Cubans have been selling their own vaccines to the Americans for years, breaking their own embargo. So yeah, lots of thoughts going on really. I think we don't need to control people. Do we give them the principles of this, the common sensing? Do we explain the principles of how a virus works? It's like, Richard, when you went to India, you had 10 needles stuck in your arm. When you go somewhere that's a bit dodgy, you need a vaccination. So we know we kind of get that. There's no conspiracy. It's not the plot of the Kingsman movie where we're all injected with a thing in our neck, and if we get near a 5G mast, we'll explode. I don't believe in all that nonsense. So yeah, I think, can we explain the principles to people? And if we do that, can we trust them to behave properly? I think not. Some parts of society, I think in general, I think we can trust people if we were to explain to them and say, you're doing this for your country, you're doing this for yourself and your family. Can we appeal to their bigger, a bigger mindset? I don't know.
Would you say that, if just to counter that, to add the fuller colour to that apple, would you say that it depends? Communication is as much as it is in the reception, down to the authenticity and the clarity of the sender. And so one could argue that to have people behave themselves, the sender of information should have a level of, or a mixture of ethos, pathos, and logos at least, if not a level of clarity of their message, so that the receiver believes that the sender even believes in what they're saying. Because at the moment, when we say that there's a restriction of, it can only be 6 people mingling, but only outside in this county, that's not a scientific statement. It's not an epidemiologist statement. It's not a financial statement. It's not. It can only be bullshit. So does that not then impact how much people behave themselves?
Absolutely. We like you say, well, we've all got biases. We filter out what we don't want to hear. We listen to what we do want to hear. And it's like when my daughter was a teenager, if I said something, it was her dad speaking, therefore I'm wrong. Yeah. And that's what happens. It's I know. But if Uncle Fred says it to her, then she'll accept it.
But then we have countries where people actually will listen to the leader of the political party, and the political party has the interests of the citizens at heart, which is the point of the reason why citizens are called citizens and cities are called cities. And when you have leaders like that, the public go, I buy that this person is being authentic, and has our best interests at heart, and they're speaking to us as a human.
Yeah.
Is that not what we may be missing here?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I also work as a coach, and I think the secret is to be, when you're candid with somebody, it means you tell them the truth from a place of love and heart. You're the one person that's going to tell them the truth because you care about them. So yeah, being candid is a good thing. But I think I think the messaging is just, how do we? I think I encapsulate it as, how do we take politics out of government?
Right.
In other words, is there, we know there's best ways of doing things, but actually the Treasury or this minister or this MP who's worried about his job, we're not going to follow we're not going to do common sense or best practice or next practice or what actually works in the real world, because I might lose my job as my MP, or I might not, so we need to get the politics out of all this. People in AstraZeneca, they want to use their science to help mankind. I have worked with these people. They are good people, and they also want to make a shitload of money as well, because we're a pharmaceutical company. So
yeah, got it. Okay, I got it. Thank you, Richard. That's brilliant. Thank you. And I will come back to you. And Darren, believe me, I've seen your reaction to several of those points, so I will come to you on them. I'm just going to give Matt a bit of a platform here, and then I'll come to you, Diane, on those points, and then over to Fiona. Matt, what's your reflection?
Oh, there's so much to unpick, but in the spirit of succinctness, I'd say there's a few key things that are coming up for me. One is the relationship between government and people, and I think that there's a problem at the minute because government's main obsession seems to be about winning first and foremost. So they're not necessarily doing what's best for their citizens. They're certainly not even necessarily doing what's best for the planet. Their first priority is, how do we maintain our success and our advantage above other parties? You mix that in with our complicitness in this, is we've got such an obsession with instant gratification, a consumption addiction. So we don't even give any. I take what you're saying about, a lot of this is bullshit. But on our part as citizens, we're not even giving anything a chance to be proven or disproven. The next idea comes up, and if it was done more honestly, like, we're going to try this, we don't know, but we think this might help, there might be a bit more buy-in. But you see it straight away within days. People are bleating about their rights. This is draconian. That we've got such a customer mentality, and we treat our government and any organization basically like the customer is always right. I'm going to complain, I know my rights, and that's a really dangerous mix, because nowhere in there has there been a recognition that this needs a lot more collaboration, and there needs a lot more sort of thinking out the box, and also that we need to allow mistakes to be made, to learn from them quickly and then try something else. We need to kind of buy into this together, mixed in obviously with my favorite subject, that the one thing I just have breathed a huge sigh of regret and despair over the last few days. Every time I hear somebody in power talk about, if you're going to have a first-class healthcare system, you need a first-class economy. Nobody seems to be going near to the fact that maybe, on top of us trying to adapt and learn and do our part, that maybe this immovable thing called the economy, that model maybe needs to change too. And is there something that could happen in response to this pandemic, which could also then relate to future pandemics? Does it help us come back into sync with nature? Is never-ending growth the answer? I would say no, and that's the problem. Yes, I'm sure there's people like that. Well, I mean, Richard said it himself. The likes of AstraZeneca, yes, there will be people out there who fundamentally had a passion about helping people, about inventing new cures, but you've got a model which traps them into perpetual growth. And there has to be a conflict there. There has to be. Because if you were so successful in curing, you'd have no revenue anymore, because people wouldn't have the illnesses anymore. So the sooner we had a renaissance of the financial institutions to talk about the models that exist, maybe a collaboration and a merging of those, and how that could also tie into how you could govern more effectively, how we could change our relationship with consumption, and how could that all fit in with you know, us as the human race on the other side of all this.
Good. Thank you, Matt. I must admit, you are also singing to the choir with me, especially on this point, but I see it from only 1 degree's difference, and that is that I cannot see very clear delineation between philosophy, politics, and economics. I see those 3 bedfellows, that triumvirate there, and the reason why, of course, you can do a degree in philosophy, politics, and economics, or PPE as it's known, is that they are actually intrinsically linked. One of the reasons why I'm not doing a degree in PPE is because when I looked at the syllabus, it was teaching you the structure of capitalist infrastructure systems that actually just self-propagates the exact same thing again and again and again, expecting a different result. It's also the reason why I quit my Birkbeck University degree in philosophy, just the philosophy part, let alone PPE, because we were being taught other people's thinking without any critique, and which was bizarre. So yes, I'm with you, Matt. Diane, there have been many times throughout these last 3 speakers where you've been nodding vigorously. Fiona is much more poised, and Diane, you're animated, which I love.
Never.
But all I know, Fiona just seems to be always staring out a window, and I don't know whether she agrees or doesn't. With you, Diane, I know that there are certain things that have definitely. So Fiona, no disrespect, I'm glad you're still on mute though, that's useful. But Diane, I'm coming to you in a sec. Diane, over to you. What parts did you resonate with from what you've heard? And what I would like not just to be in violent agreement with, which parts did you hear that you thought, no, actually, I see it in a different way? Because we tend to, on these talks, all kind of be on the same page. And I'm hoping to generate some dissonance if humanly possible.
Well, I mean, there was one point where I thought about something, but then Matt basically kind of put the point back in that I was thinking about. But I think one thing was about, you know, when we're looking at strategies, and you know, we do expect someone to have a strategy, and then it just turns out they're just all guessing their way through it. I think one thing that we experienced here as well, I mean, to start with, I think the fact that it is, or at least it comes across from what I see from the UK, is a highly politicized scene. I mean, it's always, you know, it's the announcements from Boris Johnson, it's whoever minister is talking, whereas here they have very deliberately kept it all to the agencies. So that's why we've been seeing Anders Signell day in, day out, until you were sick of his fight. And he's the most boring, I mean, you've all seen him, he's the most boring of fellas. He has zero charisma, but he brings the point across in a very, very matter-of-fact way and a very scientific way. So that's why people, I think, trusted them much more than they would have if it had been more politicians going on the scene and bringing maybe the same message, but it's really about who do you trust. But sometimes we also had the situations, because we had things going wrong in our elderly care homes and all of that. And there was always, they were always being poked by the media and saying, you know, why can you not give more specific instructions to what should the elderly care homes do? You know, what is the rule? What has to be the law? And he says, because it depends on how the elderly care home is organized. I said, we expect grown-up people and businesses to talk about their needs, their processes, and what they need to do to give the best care and to stop the infections in their environment. I cannot have one rule that will fit everybody. So, you know, I said we have to have in this situation, you know, people that are grown up enough to sit down and say, if we have to move an elderly person from A to B, what kind of protection do we need to apply, and where do we have situations where we have to? So it was really very, very harsh saying to us, you know, don't always ask for the rule so that you can say, I did it by the rule. I want you to think about what rule applies best to your situation. And I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call for some people, because it's easy also to sit back and say, well, you didn't tell me I'm not allowed to do this. But then if somebody tells you you're not allowed to do it, then you say, oh, you know, I'm getting all these restrictions. So it was really more of that effect, but also being allowed to make the mistakes. And this is what I think Matt pointed out very well. We were also told we couldn't give you all the right advice at the beginning because we didn't know ourselves. We have to, in this pandemic, also have to learn, and then we have to adjust. And the rule might be different in a month's time than what it is today. And you'll just have to like the fact of that. Yeah. So
well, and
I think
that resonates a lot when politics are removed. If the guidance changes by the day, not because of politics, but because of new information, then that would seem to carry more authenticity, right? Yeah,
definitely. I'm really sorry. I also have to unfortunately leave because I've been pushed into, although our hospitality industry is, really basically almost non-existent right now. The few people that have something to do have unfortunately been called to another call. But I really didn't want to miss the opportunity to just join for a little bit.
I really appreciate you joining. Thank you so much. I really do.
I try and come to the next one as well.
Okay.
Thank you guys. It's really good.
Speak to you soon. Okay, Fiona, over to you. So from what's maybe following from what Diane said, and I do love it when you're poised and looking out the window, by the way. That was absolutely it's a perfect look. Hard to read. I never know if you're okay, happy or sad, but it's good because I need to come to you to find your opinion. So
I'm looking at the dog. The dog is sitting by the window and I'm watching him.
Rory Sutherland, the vice chairman of Ogilvy, once said to me, he said, John, I don't mind being really, really fat and smoking. And I said, wow, how come? And he goes, because when you're at the party and you're a fat guy and you're standing in the window, you're a fat guy standing in the window. But when you're a fat guy standing in the window smoking, you're a fucking philosopher.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll buy that. So Fiona, over to you. Tell me, what was your reflection of these things?
Well, I think at the moment we're doing the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. And I don't think, the many here, doesn't mean that the few aren't important, but the few, then we can focus and look after them, the people who have secondary illnesses and the elderly. So that could be a focus, but instead we're focusing on zero death, which isn't possible. It's a virus. And so we're basically jumping into a car and driving it into the wall. The economy is printing and printing and printing trillions of pounds, thinking that this is okay. And it's not okay, because with it we'll destroy everyone's life. You go through Camden, all those little businesses under the arches, gone. There's people's full joy. Those people can't even afford to get therapy. The NHS is so down and full of fear. Yet, near the hospital, near where I am, nurses sitting on the grass, overweight, smoking cigarettes. There is nothing, right. There's nothing consistent. And this short-term economics is destroying the national health, the government's source of money. Where is the government going to get this money? Because they're crashing the businesses. There's nothing. And then they're pushing this idea that a vaccine is the only solution. What about stepping outside, getting fresh air, breathing it in instead of staying inside? It's like I get so many people coming to me saying that they've been prescribed antidepressants, which don't really work, in order to help them in lockdown. What will help them in lockdown is being told it's okay to go for a walk, get some vitamin D, get some vitamin C, but they're pushing vaccine, and but they're not giving any power to the many. That I will look after myself, I will self-care, I will eat properly. It's like a queue outside Chicken Cottage for some shit food that's so full of kind of factory farming. So what Matt was saying, and we need this huge breakdown to break through. We need a really big change, because people, the full people are full of anxiety, full of depression, suicide. The helplines for child and sexual abuse are through the roof, but they've got no money because the businesses are falling. It's on a psychological level, we are imploding. And so we're trying to come out of this with broken people.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a very moving summary, and I can only imagine how much Matt agrees with what you've just said. So Matt, I'll go over to you first.
A gazillion percent. Is that a thing? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know that years before this pandemic, I just kept looking at the problems with climate change and the amount that there was this immovable thing in people's minds, in people's psyches, and I think it would be very interesting to see what could be done to encourage the financial institutions to become the real heroes in this, maybe mixed in with the Silicon Valley and ways that it can be enabled, but to really go outside the box and say, look, what tends to be, the general agreement is the quickest point from A to B is a straight line. And our economy, in a lot of instances, resembles the furthest away from that, in the sense that we've all bought into this thing that you need to have continual growth to potentially sell a load of stuff which is arguably not needed, to get a small percentage of that to pump back into the things that everybody needs, good health, clean water, a clean planet, support for each other in terms of mental health. Well, why aren't we we've just shown that we can print trillions of pounds, dollars, whatever, but it's still being pumped up into institutions that will benefit from it. The banking industry, it's an opportunity for them. Somebody's going to end up paying them. That's there on their ledger, and interest is going to be paid on that. So there's still winners in this situation. Rather than say, well, look, what happened if, rather than relying on a lot of industry to continually grow, to give a small percentage of that to partly undo the damage that a lot of that activity creates in the first place, but to help fund things like decent healthcare, mental health care, this kind of stuff. Why aren't we saying there should be a mechanism? We can digitally create money. We should be paying people directly who have got the skills that back in the day when we were tribes that we revered, the medicine men, the hunters, the gatherers, the educators. Why? If that meant that we all bought into it and said, okay, I don't have to pay any tax either for that, because we've just agreed that money should be there, we get what we need, and also they become consumers because the money is more evenly circulated. And let's start really thinking outside the box. And yes, you might have decided that you were going to be a pub owner, but maybe we are moving into a new part of our existence where we have different roles depending on what time of the year we are, for example, depending on what's going on. So maybe some of the time we're running a pub, other times we need to shut down for whatever reason, and we are getting involved with helping clean up our local rivers, plant trees, and that is something that gets rewarded too. And this never-ending profit thing is an absolute nonsense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Matt. Well said. And you're getting much. I like. Yeah. It's very clear. I think it becomes clearer by the day at this point. Martin, very quickly, if you were to summarise, what would you say your main reflections have been from this conversation, which is surely part one of many?
Well, I think there's a kind of unison of change that we need to go through, and I'll always bring back to politics, as Matt will always bring back to the kind of economics and prosperity without growth kind of area. And I think politically we're in a situation where, and this has been coming for decades, where we've narrowed ourselves down so narrowly with the political options in this country that we now have essentially just two parties throwing mud at each other, one which is much more dominant. And that means that there's always going to be a blame game, and and this kind of binary concept of argument. So they push themselves into further and further distant corners. And I think that blame game problem has affected this government's, the way this government's failed to really rise to this challenge, because they're more worried about how they can disseminate the blame away from themselves to win, like was mentioned earlier.
Okay.
So I think that's where I'm coming from at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Well said. Good summary. Richard, over to you. I'm going to have to stick within only a minute or two.
Yeah, sure. No, I think if we wanted to, we could cure cancer. Take all the money that is spent on R&D. 15% of R&D of pharmaceutical revenues is spent on R&D. 40% is spent on sales and marketing. It's a myth that we need the money for the R&D. A lot of things could be cured. And also your nurses smoking. If you want to save the NHS, lose some weight. Simple as that. Type 3 diabetes, also known as Alzheimer's, sugar. There's so many things we could do. I think for me, it's, yes, we've got rights, we've all got rights, but we also have responsibility. So it's that whole, we need to reinvent the social contract. And I think we need a different perspective. When astronauts look back at the Earth from space, they have a religious experience, or they have an epiphany. It's called the overview effect. It's a well-known phenomenon. It's the overview effect. It's when you look at something from far enough away, you realize how one it is. Great Netflix series called One Strange Rock. We are just guests on this planet. There's 7 billion of us. There's gazillions of bugs, microbes. They own the planet. We're just the guests. So for me, it's about rights and responsibilities.
Nicely put. Very good. Very good. And Fiona, in closing, over to you.
I suppose, my concern is the more longer term one. I look at the kids. I've got teenagers as well, and I just said, stay in school because there's going to be nothing for years to come, and then come out the other end. Because I think right now it's like pendulous, that it really feels unstable. And I think we've just got to, we can't run the government, somebody else is, but we've really kind of got to do that, look out for other people. There was a man wandering around the road yesterday. He'd forgotten where he lived because the mental health unit near me is restricted. And, I can't save the world, but at least I tried to get that man home. And it's kind of where we are. And I didn't have a mask on, and he didn't have a mask on. We're very polarized, and we've kind of got to know that it isn't the government in real life. In real life, there are the grey areas, and we really must bend in order to look after people, as opposed to stand to some hideous principle that will have people suffering as a consequence. And the economy, gosh, I don't know. I do not know.
Well, that's okay, because we have our own right in front of us. We have a philosophy, politics, and economics masterclass, and we only need to know one bit of those. I think in my close is this then, and thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Martin, thank you, Matt, thank you, Rick, and thank you, Diane, for joining. One of the most salient points that's come out of this is the decoupling of politics from solutioning, which Richard mentioned, which is echoing to some extent the starting point that Fiona had, which was that what we actually require here is common sense. Now, these are disparate situations, because common sense isn't necessarily good politics. In fact, one of my favourite books on this matter is called The Dictator's Handbook, which subtitle is called Why Bad Behaviour is Almost Always Good Politics. There is only 2 reasons that you are in politics. One is to get into power, and the next is to stay in power. That's it. That's the whole thing. And the 700 and other pages of that book is 3,000 case studies proving the point. So there is absolutely no way on earth, or no reason that any, especially British politician, would need to do anything other than get in power and stay in power, and then say or do anything to ensure one of those two objectives are met. So if we assume, just pausing any disbelief of that reality, that that is the case, then to enable common sense, and then one could argue then look at a new infrastructure of economics to be brought into society, I suspect that the common sense and new models will come from elsewhere than number 10. If you're watching this from overseas, then your version of where the governments are based. And there are cases of nations where the political infrastructure is more sensical. And my frustration with this particular country where we're in the UK, where we are on this call, is that we're not in a country that is structured in a way of common sense. But for those who are watching, who may feel as if you want to be involved in another call about the solutions of this. So this is maybe this is a starting point of laying out the land. And I'm sure Matt concurs, we need to start creating solutions and alternative ways to action. Every time I listen to Matt speak about this, and I've thought about these factors for many, many, many years as well, I can't help but think that, and in fact I've written an article about it in my 2014 book called This Is Your Heart, and I'll share it with all of you and share it with this video as well, which is about how the creation of an alternative currency in Europe was an extremely successful mission, where in fact a new system was created that actually bypassed the government, that bypassed the Central European Bank. And there are ways in which you can create new systems, but which we should speak about. And I think in closing, and to Fiona's salient point around common sense being needed, I would ask anyone who watches this, and for some reason there are many more people who watch these videos than there are who get involved, by a factor of 1,000 sometimes. For those of you watching this, I would ask you to diversify your information sources. At least add on to your Daily Mail another source, or add on to your belief that one particular politician is saying something that must be true to another source. At least diversify your information gathering from different skill sets. Listen to a psychotherapist's version of the consequence of this, and a political analyst's version, and an economist's version. And to that end, do, if you can, subscribe to The Economist and New Scientist publications, rather than just the Mail Online or the Telegraph, because we need to actually add other views of information here. And I'm so honoured that, especially Fiona, from a psychotherapist's point of view, your voice has been added to this mix, because to reveal my cards in all of this, which I'm sure will come as no surprise, I don't trust any of the guidance given whatsoever from the politicians. Not a single jot of it is based on what is right for people, and that winds me up so intensely. I can't bring myself to even entertain giving energy to the horse shit that's expunged by people who are absolute psychopaths. That's my cards. But thank you so much for everyone for joining, and power to the people. I shall see you all soon, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye, everyone.